Interesting choice of words on the Daily Nation and the Standard, and they both start with exposed. It means there are things that are happening behind the scenes that are being brought to the fore. And fine, before we get to the housing levy, because it is a very thorny issue, let's start off with issues about money. And if you look at today's Standard, exposed 883 million shilling scam universities, the education sector no less. And it reminds me of the headlines from yesterday, still to do with the universities. And if I may look at yesterday's paper, the Standard, dead teachers paid millions. And they're talking about 446 billion shillings, 446 million shillings rather, paid to teachers in 1 year who had already exited the service. Now, because I want to draw a comparison between the kind of situation the country is in right now and the wastage we're seeing. On the Business Daily, 86 billion shillings financial crimes flagged. That is yesterday's dailies. Let's come back to today's. And on the Standard, that amount there on the front page. We look at other dailies here, and I don't know why my technology is a bit slow. Yes, on the People Daily, the front page, CBC, still on education matters, caught in 4 billion shilling scandal. That's a CBC. And I think there's one more. There should be one more. Yes, on the Business Daily, State House overshoots 6-month budget by 447 million shillings. So on one hand, we're talking about debt. We have been in a very bad situation, and hence the pain we feel as a country. But on the other hand, we see a lot of these loopholes, money being lost through corruption, overspending by government, exceeding a budget by close to 500 million shillings is not something small. And we're asking, in as far as governance is concerned, where could the issue be? Is it a matter of, because we're talking about austerity on one hand, and we are in dire straits, but are we behaving as if we need to rectify something? Let's start with you, Angelo.
Right. In fact, yeah, we remember that Kenya is a rich country. Kenya is one of the largest economies in Africa, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. And so we are a model for other countries. And the question becomes, how well are we stewarding this leadership position? And are we making the decisions today to remain as an economic leader? And indeed, like you say, we are in a critical economic situation. And you can see also on the headlines where the Parliamentary Budget Office is giving a roadmap to fix the debt mess and to pay suppliers. We got into this situation because of a debt binge under the Jubilee administration. We had a failing economy under the Moi administration. NAC administration came in 2003, and in about a year or two was able to turn our fortunes around. But again, in 2 to 3 years, the Jubilee administration went on a debt binge, borrowing expensively, irresponsibly for infrastructure projects that were not viable, did not have a return on investment because they had political interests, drove us into this situation. Now, under the Kenya Kwanza administration, the priority actually was to fix the economy, to stop borrowing, to reduce taxation, and to grow the economy. And the only way to do that had to be to curb waste. We were promised that the budget deficit would be capped. I think the figure given was something like, was it 5 or 6%? But what we are seeing is government making budgets. Indeed, they cap the deficit, but then as they implement, they go and overshoot
more or less,
the deficit.
more of the same.
So we are seeing indiscipline at a time when we can't afford indiscipline. We are seeing corruption at a time when we cannot, there's no money to steal. Poverty is deepening. Households are paying heavily because of Kenyans are overtaxed, and we are not seeing the benefits of that taxation. So we are at an economic crisis, but I think the political crisis is one of lack of discipline, lack of accountability. And the big question really is, how do we wake up our political leaders to the reality that when you have a crucial vote in the House on a bill like the housing levy, leaders cannot afford to absent themselves.
Yes.
That it is up to our political leaders to hold the executive to account, and right now that's not happening.
And we'll come to that because we'll need to question the absence of so many members of Parliament from the House yesterday. But still on this issue of government expenditure and sealing loopholes, especially when we lose a lot of money through corruption. When it comes to matters of education, the discussion for this whole year has been how expensive education is, how we do not have enough funding or resources for education, how parents are now being burdened by higher school fees. The government is not even able to meet the capitation as required, yet it is in that sector that we are seeing all these loopholes, payments being made to universities that are not supposed to be made. We're talking about billions of shillings, because if you just make a quick calculation on the money that we've lost, it's already over 1 billion shillings. Now, it points to the fact that we are not necessarily a poor country. We may have the money. It is to do with the management.
Okay, thank you so much, Edmudi. And it's rather unfortunate when we are discussing a pertinent issue in this country, and that is education. And being a scholar, I feel very sad when such figures are being exposed. But there's one lie or a fallacy that need to be deconstructed in this country. When this government came into place, they said they found empty coffers. I don't think that is true. That is a lie. It's a fallacy that needs to be deconstructed. I mean, it's not true. When you see the kind of wastage, the kind of travels, the kind of spending that is being spent within government and without mentioning anybody, you can tell there was something. I mean, if you have a granary and you keep saying there is no maize and you are eating maize, where are you getting the maize from, you know? So the granary had something, and that is why they are getting something. But again, when you see such kind of things, and I keep repeating, our education system is very expensive. That is number one, because our country, I remember not the former regime, but the other one had envisioned a free primary, secondary, and almost university free education. But that is not happening. And when it is not happening, what that means is that Kenyans and parents have to dig deep to be able to pay for their school fees. Let us go back to politics, you know, politics of the day, because everything is politicized. Even this university education is politicized, you know. You find our politics is very expensive, and the stakes are very high, you know, and there is a lot to lose as a politician when you support one side or you don't support another side. There is a lot to lose. It's not limited to our campaigns. Our campaigns are very expensive. And when they are very expensive, we find we get even leaders who will fake even degrees, who will fake anything to be where they are, where they want to be. And now that actually cascades down to all levels. You find if you have, I'm not saying I don't know because I'm not the PSC, you know, to actually be able to know that. But I can tell you, this is not a problem of now. It's a perennial problem. I mean, it's a problem that is deep-rooted.
Systemic.
It is systemic. So I think it's rather sad that we have our universities losing money or scandals and all that. And I think university is a place whereby we don't have any other place. I mean, when you go to the university, I mean, you've reached the head. You know, you can only be at the university to do a PhD, a postdoctorate, or what. You can only be there. I mean, there's nowhere else you can go. So I think it's a high time the executive looks into that issue, because it is a serious issue. And I'm sure because we have legislators who are actually listening to us, they're going to do something.
Yes.
Because we can joke with everything else, but when we joke with education and healthcare of our country, and now the housing, I mean, you know, I don't want to be rude and ask who doesn't have their own place where they come from.
And I know I can tell the urgency to talk about the housing levy. We'll come to that. But we do have a legislator in the House, and these revelations have been made by the Auditor General to the respective committees of Parliament. So when we look at the role of Parliament and parliamentarians in all this, we are left with so many questions, because when we're discussing Kenya's fiscal health, our finances, we rarely get these discussions in Parliament on issues of debt, on issues of corruption, on issues of austerity. We were told that this country was in a dire straits. How come we're not seeing these conversations in Parliament? Matters debt, we rarely get them discussed in Parliament. We just hear the executive talking about it. Corruption, it is not a conversation that we appear to be interested in having, sealing loopholes. And even on austerity measures, if at all we're doing so badly as a country, how come we're not mainstreaming and ensuring that everyone, including the executive, is actually sticking to the straight and narrow?
Wow, okay. You know, it's, they say Rome was not built in a day. But you know, the way Parliament is structured, when there is, like for instance, let me take you to COVID. When there was COVID and the misuse of funds, right? Different committees had to deal with it, whether it's the Health Committee, the Public Investment Committee. So we call in the various reports, the people, the sagas, and we get the findings. Then we make a report. We table the report. Then the report then goes to the next stage. At one point or another, it has to be picked up by the EACC in our recommendations, and it has to be picked up by the DPP's office. So Parliament can make a report finding that these people are culpable, all right? And there are many reports that Parliament has made to that effect. But we are not the ones who will go out and prosecute or go out and do the final investigation to tally. We will give our opinion as legislators that, you know, we've gone through the finances, we've gone through the expenses, we've found that something is amiss here, right? And we've called in all the bodies and we've put it all in a report. So there are many such reports. And if you look at all these reports, when we say the EACC should investigate further and take action and prosecute, if they don't do it, I think one of the things that we have to do as a country is, instead of pointing fingers, is to really make a collective decision that we want to decisively deal with corruption. And then we have to strengthen the institutions that are mandated to deal with corruption. Okay. From the EACC to the police force, to the DCI, to the DPP, to, you know, the judiciary. But I think, you know, I always liken Kenya to this octopus that has 8 legs, and we're stuck because every leg is pulling in a different direction. If we all pull in the same direction, and that direction being, we want to see a Kenya that is beautiful for all of us.
Yes, I guess the concern is the fact that when you're talking, if you look at the front page of the Standard, on the top strip, there's an issue of debt mentioned twice, different headlines. Debt repayments swallow 98% of January revenues.
Yes.
That's a crisis.
It is a crisis.
Another one, Ruto adds 3 trillion shilling to public debt. We've been told over and over, debt is the biggest problem we have. Our concern is, from the direction of Parliament, we're not having our legislators driving this conversation. How come we're not seeing concern from the Houses of Parliament, if at all debt is our biggest problem? Okay,
I'll tell you what. Debt in itself is not bad. If you look at the greatest economies in the world, and you look at the debt that they have, the debt ratios that they have, they're very, very high. But the thing is, money is used properly. There is no siphoning, there is no corruption, okay? Or minimal corruption, they will not have an impact. So debt, you cannot build an economy without debt. Just look at you, if you look at your own life, right? From where you started, to buy your first house, to buy your first car, right? You went into debt. Everybody, you go to a high purchase, you buy a car. So there's nothing wrong with debt. There's everything wrong with debt if 90 or 80 or 50% of that debt that you're borrowing doesn't do the work that it was intended to do. So if, for instance, or you got a road deal, because right now we're going into public-private partnerships. Public-private partnerships are great, but the question is, are they good for the country if we're making billionaires out there as a result of our partnerships. For instance, if we do a partnership, and everybody needs to make a reasonable profit, because you've come in, you've put your money, you've taken the risk, you've given us an express highway, you've given us an SGR. But the question is, are we managing to make sure that the country doesn't give somebody 3 or 4 times the cost of that infrastructure? So for me, I feel it's about inner consciousness. You know, I think a country is driven by its citizens, and its citizens have got to be people that want good for themselves, good for the future generation. All right, because we all have children.
Yes. My question is, when we look at them as our representatives, the houses, and I'm just using you as an example.
Don't worry.
And the issue is the feeling that this is our biggest problem. We are at crisis level when it comes to debt, but we are not feeling this discussion happening at the higher echelons of leadership, especially from our legislators who are our representatives. From a governance and accountability perspective, a standpoint, what do you feel, what is the disconnect? Is it that our leaders are not really taking this thing seriously?
Yes, and Fred, indeed there is a disconnect, and I agree with Honorable Passaris that we need to pull together as a country. We need the citizens, we need our political leaders, we need the executive, we need development partners, all pulling together for the interests of the country. Because whereas Kenya is a rich country, we are not stewarding our resources responsibly. And I do agree there is a problem with the PPPs. We've seen private sector coming into public delivery. And it's interesting that a hustler government, a hustler regime is the one bringing in private sector into the public sector. Private sector, if not well managed, will be predatory. And I think that's what Esther is telling us here. But who is going to scrutinize this private sector if the public participation process does not open citizens to those deals? Because, for instance, privatization, the privatization bill that also sailed through the House does not have parliamentary scrutiny over privatization. If there is no scrutiny of those deals by Parliament, if there is no approval by Parliament of debt by Parliament, so the quagmire we are in is that there are gaps in legislation. But Parliament that can fix those gaps, instead of fixing the gaps,
hands off,
is operating like a rubber stamp. In fact, spell rubber stamp, spell banana republic. We have a progressive constitution. Power of the purse has been given to the House because this is one of the most powerful parliaments you have even on the continent, because the powers that this parliament wields are, enshrined in the Constitution. But instead of using them, the politics of the day is to buy parliamentarians. So they are not voting with their party. The parties have become vehicles really for just accessing power. And I think Shege was telling us that the politics has overridden everything. So instead of appearing in the House to vote down a bill that has gaps, because the problem with this housing levy is not the idea, it's the way it's structured. And there is this private actor that is sitting behind there who we will in another 6 months, a year, we'll be seeing a report by the Auditor General that housing levy funds are being siphoned off. And Parliament did not vote against it.
That's exactly what we'll be talking about after the break. We're still looking at the role of Parliament. They cannot escape scrutiny this time round because they are our representatives. And we'll be looking at their performance yesterday as the House passed and approved the Affordable Housing Bill, which now heads to the Senate. Less than half of the members of the House were present, and we'll be looking at that after the break. You're watching Morning Cafe. And we're back. This is Morning Cafe on TV 47. My name is Fred Ndimuli. I'm still in studio with Esther Passaris, Woman Representative, Nairobi County, Wanjiru Gekonyo, Advocate for Good Governance and Accountability, and Julia Shege, Governance Expert. And we now want to look at the other headline, and that's on The Nation. And it starts with the same word as a standard, exposed. 149 MPs who failed Kenyans when a crucial vote on a bill imposing a housing levy that has generated huge public interest came up in the House on Tuesday evening. 149 MPs, despite their previous public show of approval or disapproval, were a no-show. An even bigger group snapped the final legislative stage yesterday. Now, the Daily Nation has done us justice and even give us names of those people who were absent on the front page, and that continues on page 7. And it would appear that Esther Passaris, you're among those who were absent. You're not in the House yesterday.
Yes.
What happened?
Now, okay, so first of all, there's a big IGAD conference going on right now on gender mainstreaming. And I was nominated to, myself and Beatrice Alachi were nominated to be there. We're the host country for an IGAD gender. We've got Uganda here, we've got South Sudan here, we've got Somalia here. So as the host country, we can't be absent for a big conference where you've got other countries represented and we're the host country. So it was myself, Gladys Cholet, and Beatrice Alachi was supposed to be attending. So Beatrice Alachi and I, because she's also absent, were both at the IGAD conference happening at the Trademark Hotel. All right, and we were there. And then the thing is, one of the things that a political party has a whip is because when something is near, right? Parliament has so many things going on. You might reach the vote at that particular time, or it might go to the next day. So when you're having a vote going to happen in Parliament, then your whip is supposed to call all the members or post on the political wall. I'm on the ODM wall. There was no mention that, hey, head to the House, the vote should be happening in the next 10 or 15 minutes.
So you're basically not aware that the vote was happening at that time?
At that particular time, not aware. But, cutting through traffic, getting from Trademark, going to Parliament for the vote probably would have been an impossible task, because then they close the doors, then the vote starts. But, having said that, for me, I want you to understand the government that we have in place right now. We've got an executive with the majority. Now, I have to compliment HE for having that desire to deliver on his manifesto, right? And making sure that he keeps the numbers. That's somebody that's on top of his game, all right? So he's got the Jubilee MPs, he's got quite a few supporters from within Azimio, and he's got his own numbers. So he's managed to get the numbers.
Let me just
right?
get it clear. Are you saying that because of the majority that the executive controls in the House, that has put off many from the minority side from trying to challenge any legislation?
No, you had a walk-off. You had a walk-out of Parliament by the Azimio. But did that change the fact that the vote was positive towards the government? No, it did not. Because no matter what, they didn't have the numbers. All right? Now, that's the one scenario. So no matter what, if the government wants to push an agenda, they have the numbers. We can go to court, we can make our statements, we can try. You see, there was a lot of amendments that Azimio wanted to put during the Committee of the Whole House. But again, that goes through a vote. And if you try and put the amendment and it goes through a vote. So this is why I say sometimes it's good to let reason bring you together to talk.
But
right?
I need to understand, is that how Parliament is supposed to work? That
yes,
once the
that's the
majority has an overwhelming majority, it means the minority don't even bother to vote?
No, it's not. In fact, the question says it all. Because if we go with that mindset, we would not have been able to remove the dictatorial Moi regime. We would not have been able to get multi-party democracy. We would not have been able to get a new constitution. If that, hold on. If that is the thinking. So that excuse, by the way,
that was populous.
That
was a nation ready. With people on the streets, with demonstrations.
People did not
holding the government to account.
My concern is how the numbers in Parliament work.
The problem is, excuse me, that mindset
let's allow it.
Actually is a complicity. And that is a comfort zone that our political leaders are choosing to play victim. Now, if they play victim, what about those households? We are saying that so many more households poverty has deepened, approaching some almost 30% of households falling below the acceptable poverty line. What about those households who do not sit in parliament, who do not enjoy the powers of parliament? Should they then play victim?
Okay.
You cannot, in the face of evil, they say, if good people do nothing, evil prevails. And I want to put it to you that there is evil in the house because you yourself, Honorable Passaris, have said that we have problems in the private public space. And you have also said that corruption is endemic in this country. So it behooves parliamentarians to show up and vote in the House to curb corruption. And we are saying that this bill has inbuilt corruption, budgeted corruption, policy and legislative corruption in this bill. That is perpetrating evil and injustice. And you can't say, I was at a regional conference, so I will not execute my constitutional, representative and legislative mandate. And that is a betrayal of
allow Julia Chege to raise, because I'm sure you must.
Thank you so much. With all the intentions being good towards the housing bill, I mean, I would like my people to live in a better place. I mean, all of us here, none of us has come from the slum. That is the truth.
Exactly.
But majority of our people, especially in Nairobi, they live in the slum. And even, there are some people, even in the villages, they live in with the urban setup because they don't have a place. But the question and the pertinent question is the implementation of this bill. That is the challenge. And I want to congratulate the MPs who, by default, all intentionally, didn't vote for this bill because it is a punitive bill. And the truth is, when it was subjected to public scrutiny during public participation, many people made fun and they were asking, if I'm contributing, for example, you know, I want to talk like a lay person, I'm contributing 700 shillings or 1,000, and then I want a house of 4 million, and I'm a boga, when will I be able to raise the deposit, you know? So for me, what I think, and from where I sit, it is a good bill, but then it is also a punitive bill.
Yes.
I think the registrators who are in parliament, they have not moved, because I have seen the majority leader here saying that they want to see who is not going to vote. I think our legislators have not left the polling station. They're still at the polling station, and they're still playing politics, and no wonder even something good. I mean, that bill is very good, but it has not been sold to us. We need to buy it. We need to be engaged, you know?
And as you responded to the questions they've raised, I would also want to ask you this question. What is your stand on this affordable housing?
First of all, I mean, I'm a member of the Housing Committee, all right? I'm a member of the Housing Committee, so I'm aware of, I was there in the public participation. I'm a member of the Housing Committee. I supported the finance bill. And to be quite honest, if I was in the House yesterday, I would have voted yes. All right? And the reason I would have voted yes, my county, Nairobi, all right? My county, Nairobi, almost 60-70% live in the slums. And it's deplorable. We cannot have a country with an express highway, with super malls like we have, with luxury palatial homes in Riverside, Muthaiga, Lavington, and then the workers that come to work for us live in such horrible, horrible situations. Now, one thing I can tell you, you know, when you say that there is corruption in the bill, let me tell you something. There is never corruption in the bill, all right? There is corruption in implementation of any bill, all right? Or any, that there will be. But one thing I know, it is the president's agenda to deliver on houses. And I have seen him, and I have walked, you know, I went to the Mukuru launch, and CS Macharia, James Macharia, stood up and made his, it was the last event he attended in Mukuru, and he stood up and he said to the president, Your Excellency, I have to commend you. What you have managed to unlock in 2 weeks with this project that we're commissioning it now, we were stuck for 2 years. Because they could not agree, the metropolitan, the KCB, the community.
Concerns have been raised
So for me, we have a president who is a go-getter, who has an agenda, and he wants to
and
deliver.
And we may be in agreement that the intention is good. The intention is good. But there are questions that have been raised about
Let me tell you something about Let me tell you something. Did any of you, I want to ask both of you, did any of you attend any of the public participations? Did any of you give memorandums to the Committee of Housing on your concerns? Because if you didn't, coming to a TV studio and criticize, it doesn't help.
We covered a lot of that.
We gave our submissions through our representative organization. So yes, we did give submissions.
Right.
But the point is this.
And were they taken into account? Were they taken into account?
Okay.
No, they were not. And well, you know what? First of all, we are not in any way saying that it is not an important agenda. And even though I'm surprised that you sound more like a Kenya Kwanza legislator, I'm wondering, when I voted, I thought I put a ballot for Azimio, but I'm not hearing that. We are not saying we do not have, that Kenyans should not own homes. What we are saying is that this bill has problems in it. And part of the problems is where the state comes in to take up the responsibility of financing the affordable housing. Because we have the social housing, which only the government can do, but we've got affordable housing that can be built by the private sector. And the role of government, and this is our argument, the role of government is to create an enabling framework, not to enter into the provision of financing and development solutions. And the point I'm making, and why I say there is corruption in the bill, is because Parliament is allowing government to enter into a space, one, that is competing with the private sector, which it should not do. And then two, there is lack of accountability in that financing mechanism. And the point I was making here is, for instance, the e-citizen. And this is mirrored again in the housing bill, where the Attorney General is asking, there is lack of accountability. There is little state control over the payment portal when you get into these financing arrangements. So I put it to you that advisories were given by institutions that are well informed about e-governance and also the financing, development finance governance. Parliament did not listen and has gone on, and you're making an argument ignoring, and the role of Parliament is
we need to question the process. At what point the public participation comes in? Because my understanding is that once a bill is presented to Parliament and then public participation is conducted, then whatever changes have to be made have to be proposed through amendments.
No, the public participation.
Yesterday, the Affordable Housing Bill was passed through the House without a single amendment.
Where's the committee?
Therefore, it means that none of the suggestions that were made...
That's what I'm telling you. The government has the numbers, all right? The government has the numbers. Okay, so what I want to say, let me tell you something. You know, when you are elected, you come in through a party, and there's something called party position, all right? But at the end of the day, you're also an individual, and you also are representing the people in your personal capacity, not just as a political party. When we take oath of office, right, you know, we're not just supposed to listen and support the Azimio people who voted for you. When you take oath of office, you are a legislator for the entire country. You are supposed to be able to serve everybody. When you come to my office and you want to be supported, I don't care whether you were Jubilee, whether you were Azimio, whether you were UDA, whether you're Kenya Kwanza, whether you're this tribe, this religion, that religion. I represent everybody. Okay. I'm a legislator representing everybody.
Is that how your colleagues in Kenya Kwanza are acting? Because there was a parliamentary group meeting in Naivasha.
You know what?
And they were told how to act.
Look, I told you. You know, that's what everybody's saying. Okay, the president obviously wants his agenda. The same way Azimio party leader sometimes says, this is what I want from all of you. But at the end of the day, you're an individual. For me, as a legislator in Nairobi, as a member of the Housing Committee, one thing I've seen 40,000 houses being commissioned in Nairobi. Employment opportunities, all right? It can revamp an entire economy, right? Better housing facilities. When we commission the housing in Nairobi or Kibra, each and every one of those housing, from the low cost, from the slum upgrading, all the way social houses, all the way to affordable, each and every one of those houses is going to be occupied.
In the role of Parliament,
do we have challenges?
Should in the role of Parliament then should be to improve this piece of legislation so that it does not encounter legal hurdles that we saw with the finance bill.
You know what? Legislation, I was sitting earlier and we were having a chat. I was saying that legislation is not cast in stone. Okay, right now we've passed the housing bill. Let the levy come in. Let the money go into producing the houses. Now, if the private sector We've been independent for over 60 years. If the private sector was able to provide the houses, are you trying to tell me that in the last 60 years, we never had an enabling environment? Why do we have so many slums?
Yes.
Question is, don't you see, let's allow Julia to chip in as well. Don't you see this piece of legislation, once assented to, experiencing or meeting the same legal hurdles that it has? The fact that Parliament is failing to perform its role of ensuring that the fine print is actually looked at properly. It's the same challenge they had last time. That failure to change anything, failure to amend, failure to correct mistakes will definitely meet legal hurdles after this.
Yeah, definitely. I expect the bill to meet all those handles. And I mean, even if it goes to Senate, that is not the last, you know. It will have to, I'm sure somebody somewhere will go to court and it will be stopped. Because in the beginning, the idea of affordable housing for everybody, it is good. I agree, everybody should be able to live in a decent home. But this bill, when it is being when the taxes are being collected from Kenyans, that is where we are feeling that there is no accountability, you know. Like now, we have been having people who are employed who have a salary, I'm sure. And even some people the other day were saying, I don't want to have a salary because I don't want to pay this kind of punitive taxes. I think the challenge that we have from the onset, our contribution, the registrators, let me talk like an outsider because I didn't make it when I vied, but one day maybe I will. And I think our registrators, they have a challenge. There is a challenge that we need to unlock. And as my sister here, Parasadis, is putting it, once you are a registrator, you are from ODM, Kenya Kwanza and all that, you need to be a registrator for Kenyans. But what is happening, politics play into place. And you find that the majority or the ruling party, if it has the majority, it has more MPs and all that, it tries to buy the other MPs so that you can have the numbers. And I want to salute the president because he has been able to convince the other members from Jubilee and others, independent and all that, to be part of the game. I think that is why he is able to sail through with such numbers. But I want to remind our registrators, put yourself in the shoes of these Kenyans who are lamenting in all corners of this country. Today, they have a salary, they have a pension, they are able to afford. But tomorrow, we have seen MPs who have been registrators and they're on the streets.
And let's be fair, let's be fair to the legislators because yesterday I saw even Azimio legislators, once they walked out of the House, they addressed the media and they actually listed the issues they have with this bill. And they said these are the same issues we raised earlier, even when the finance bill was being processed. Issues to do with who will end up owning these houses. How come the issues of discrimination that were picked out by the court. Some of these issues, none of them has been addressed. So who will address them?
Exactly.
Parliament doesn't.
We're having a problem with this idea of tyranny of numbers. We are having also a problem with our political parties in that the president has been able to woo members of the other political party to vote for him. And I get disturbed by blanket statements of supporting the president with his agenda, because whereas there may be a good agenda, the president has reneged on some of his key promises and continues to renege on them. So are you blindly saying I'm supporting a manifesto when you can see the manifesto is being violated by the very, those were false promises. They were lies to the people of Kenya on fiscal policy. If you supported that taxation bill, the promise was to reduce taxation, not to tax and even go for the little money that university students are using and to put it through a scheme that is then not transparent. You can't blindly support an objective when at implementation level there are problems. So number one, let's recognize that there is a problem in the political realm. But if we look at this idea of the legality of the bill, even if this bill now having passed because of the tyranny of numbers, even if the court can't find a fault in it, let us remember, Nazi Germany, apartheid in South Africa was legislated. You can have immoral legislation. You can have bad legislation. So there have been advisories to Parliament by experts, by institutions like the World Bank, that government should not enter into the delivery of affordable housing, leave it to the private sector, create the enabling environment. So why is the government pushing out private sector? So actually the irony with this government, despite its hustler narrative promises, is pushing out private sector. So job losses, because because of the cost of living, because of high cost of business, because of high taxation, businesses are closing down. Manufacturing, Kenya has been deindustrializing because the number of companies in manufacturing cannot afford to operate. They are relocating from Kenya to other places. So it's so ironic that government is actually losing jobs. And then they say, let us compete with the private sector, push them out. Government will come in, do the delivery, and create jobs for a period. Because then also the point that this is building houses. Are you saying that there are no houses that have been built? What we are saying is that there are not enough affordable houses. And the problem with this is, what is the problem this bill is seeking to cure?
Yes.
And there is a mismatch between the problem and the bill. Because the problem, the problem is the mortgage industry has been restrictive. It is the role of Parliament to streamline these gaps. Okay. The other problem has been the cost of land. Now government owns the land, and the government has said we can make the land available it needs to be in a transparent framework, because we don't want it to be used to grab land. So there's a lack of enabling framework, there's a lack of accountability in government's role. So we are not arguing that it's important,
so the question
but we are saying that the Committee on Housing has failed
to
scrutinize the bill
the
properly.
National Assembly has added any value
Can I tell you,
bill?
all of us, first of all, everybody, even the ones who walked out or the ones who voted no, everybody, every constituency in this country is going to get houses. Do you know, there is so much benefit. And for me, we're not shutting out the private sector, because right now, for me, and it was in the manifesto for Azimio as well, that we would have housing as a key agenda. We would provide and housing tax. Even Uhuru used to talk about a housing tax. He was stopped by Kotu, right? So now, for me, the fact that we have a budget dedicated directly for housing, we will address. We've been talking about Kenya needs 150,000 houses every year. We need over 300,000 houses every year. The population is growing. And I tell you one thing, the slums, the next big pandemic, we will see an entire generation wiped out if we don't sort out our housing. So for me, the housing, the SDGs, the MDGs, the Agenda 2063.
I think we're in agreement.
We're in agreement to sort out the housing.
Yes.
So let me tell you what.
It's the value that Parliament is adding to
participation.
that.
I was part of the bill making. We took into account. But when you want to criticize something, when you want to show, if I want to look at her, no matter how perfect, we condemn Jesus. No matter how perfect someone is, if you're looking for fault, you will find fault. The question is now for the Oversight Committee, which is us in the housing, and we've been around the whole country. We've seen where there were gaps. We've seen where there were problems, because we have this whole agenda of putting markets everywhere. We have some markets that are white elephants. We have some markets that are used. What do you do with that infrastructure? In the housing, we go around the entire country as a committee. We've got a chair, Joanna Geno, who makes sure that we're going to every project.
Quick question on that note, because you say you're in the Committee of Housing. Yes. Are you saying that this bill, as it is right now, is 100% perfect? It has no loopholes.
Let me tell you something. There is nothing perfect. Not even man and woman created by God were perfect. So there is nothing perfect.
Has the committee sought to actually rectify anything in that bill?
But let me tell you something. You see, you realize, as I said, legislation is not cast in stone. But we cannot be arguing forever and ever. Let us get it done. The courts pronounced the issues that they had. We as a housing committee, with the law, decided, you know what, let's correct what we did wrong. Yes, we did a few things wrong, bringing housing in the finance bill. All right? So now we've got the affordable housing bill. We've taken into account a lot of the contributions that were made by the public. We went around the entire country for 2 weeks. Maybe we didn't take everything, but we took a majority of the amendments that people talk to us about in the public participation. Our key task is to make sure that the major beneficiary of these houses are going to be the majority of the people, which we call the hustlers, all right? The next thing, that these houses are going to be built to a very high standard, and these houses are going to be cost effective. The money and the allocation will be fair. That's what the courts wanted.
Okay.
So for me, instead, we're stuck. Let's move on.
Okay.
Let's move on.
Fair enough. The bill moves to the Senate. If at all, I'm sure there'll be more debate. Whether or not that will be effective, we have to wait and see.
I really want, when you hear of a housing project being launched, see the benefits, see the people. And let me tell you what,
there've been housing projects before. It's always contentious. But the point we are making here that you've chosen to ignore, and Parliament chose to ignore, because this Parliament is not listening to feedback. And the feedback,
I think that's wrong. That's wrong. No, public participation was about feedback.
The submissions were made. But the point that was made is the role of government. It's the mechanism of how. It's not the if or the what. We support the bill. We support the intentions, but we needed the housing committee to go and make sure the checks and balances, the role of government is restricted to government's primary mandate, so that you have an enabling framework and an accountability framework. Because when now the Auditor General report comes to you saying that because of the weaknesses in the law, we are not able to account for how some of the monies in this framework are being applied, we don't want you to come and say, oh, but we made recommendations.
No, but
it is not our role, it is EACC. So you are creating weak laws. And then you come and complain EACC is not working. So how are you serving Kenyans?
You know what? Let me tell you something. Let me tell you, as I said, law is not cast in stone. If this bill is assented to by the president, it will go to the CS. The CS will make certain regulations, look at policies, look at other things. All right, it's a process. And as we move along, right, at the end of the day, what we want is a fund dedicated to housing, working with the private sector, giving government land. And then, the beautiful part about this is that once we start building houses in the urban centers of various counties, we will free a lot of agricultural land. Okay? So for me, let us,
and I think we've spent a lot of time on this.
You know what, for me, right? For me, if I get 200,000 houses in Nairobi over the next 3 or 4 years because of this fund. A lot of my citizens will be living in good places. A lot of job opportunities will be created. We will be complying with the world agenda of decent housing.
And I think we've actually exhausted that discussion.
For me, it is worth it. It is worth it. We can disagree.
A little corruption is
now that the National Assembly,
I
want us to move away from this issue of affordable housing, because I think we've dispensed with it.
Let me tell you something. I cannot guarantee, no one can guarantee that there will never be corruption. What we have to make sure is that we're continuously, these people here who were exposed with the 883 million. Right now, EACC should be on their case, should be making arrests, all right?
Let's focus on Parliament.
The problem with the country, the laws are there. By the way, the laws are there.
Close the loop.
Look at femicide. Look at femicide.
Okay. I want us to look at, still in Parliament, we move on now to the NADCO report. Now that the National Assembly has already dispensed with the affordable housing bill, the next order of priority will be the NADCO report, which is also very consequential to us because it holds hostage a lot of things, including the reconstitution of the IEBC. Now, with what you've seen, the conduct of members of the National Assembly with this affordable housing bill, what expectations do you have, Julia, when it comes to the NADCO report?
First of all, just one pointer on the affordable housing debate. That is a very contentious issue. And even if we spend 10 hours, we will not come to an answer, we will not agree. But let us see what Senate will do. Let us see who is going to go to court, because somebody somewhere will go, and several people, because there were recommendations that have not been followed. And if you make weak laws and then you come to and tell us, oh, we are sorry, some money was, embezzled and all that, that is not what we want to see. And that is why we are saying, let us have clear roadmap.
Okay.
But now the NADCO report here is another, hot thing, and they spent a lot of money for Kenyans, taxes and all that. And one of the things that was being raised is the cost of living in the NADCO report. And I'm sure that is not being looked at. And how do you reduce the cost of living? One, by making sure that we have agriculture that is ongoing. We have manufacturing that is ongoing. We have cottage industries that are mushrooming. We have job opportunities that are ongoing. But what are we seeing right now? We are seeing a country whereby we are actually exposing or we are actually now telling Kenyans, hey, you can go and work outside Kenya. You know, we are not actually localizing our jobs. And for me, from where I sit, that NADCO report, because most of the things that were recommended there are not handled. It is all going to be a failure. The other thing I want to talk about on NADCO report, look at our IBC. They recommended it should be constituted. Right now, I'm sure Muhesh knows very well, we are time-barred constitutionally. By 5th of March, they ought to have demarcated boundaries. And you know, I want to be a bit selfish and tell Kenyans, from where I come from Central Kenya, we stand to lose when it comes to the IBC right now in terms of the boundaries and all that. If we do not look into that thing, then I don't think there will be need for me and anybody else to go into politics and vie, because the same thing that happened in 2022 will be translated to 2027. And if we cannot look at IEBC, we cannot look at the structure. We don't have a Chebukati of 2027. Right now, we don't have commissioners in place. So what are we trying to say? Okay. You see, so the NADCO report was very clear, but as we have always seen, because we also, people learn through very many things, through seeing, through, hearing, through even smelling and all that. We can see the direction the country is headed. Okay. We are not in a good position. We are at a position whereby I know most of the legislators who actually walk with their head and they are like, if this is wrong, it is wrong. If it is good, it is good. But I know of a few that, and actually the majority, they will go by the party. If the party says that this is good, and they'll just ratify it.
Are you comfortable with that kind of approach, that the NADCO report is so heavy in so many different things that will be so consequential in as far as even our constitution and the integrity of our laws is concerned? Are you comfortable with the conduct of Parliament in the fact that especially the President's party simply tore the President's line? Yeah. Are you comfortable in their handling of that matter?
Well, you know, NADCO is almost a reiteration of the BBI, but this time some lessons were learned. It was handled differently, looking more at the parliamentary route than this big legislative route, because that didn't end well. But it's really, again, it's the problems in our politics, because NADCO is a conversation between our political elites. And there are a few issues there that are important to Kenyans, like the cost of living, which were not properly addressed. I think there were a few concessions that were made in NADCO, but overall, that issue was forced in there by Azimio, but the real discussion is about political sharing of power. And so what we expect to see now, that there are discussions that maybe Honorable Raila Odinga may be given a position with the AU, so we might see this idea that Office of the Opposition, which has been advised to be an unconstitutional provision, we might see that one not take root. So NADCO has a lot of different proposals, some of which I believe will be pursued. For instance, this NGCDF Senate fund, there is this contentious issue of funds by our politicians, and they are slush funds. They are part of the corruption of the political process. Oh my goodness. We will see that one pursued because it's of interest. What we won't see, of course, the IBC is a crisis, I think, for the whole country. Yeah. And we are waiting to see how this is going to be resolved because of the constitutional timeline.
Imagine.
What we won't see pursued is, for instance, we have a problem with campaign financing, because when we say we have a progressive constitution, we've now got a strong electoral system, the political culture continues to be a problem. And I think that's what Esther is telling us here, that this tyranny of numbers, lack of accountability in the political space, makes an individual legislator forced to make some compromises that undermine their ability to represent the public. A big part is campaign financing. NADCO report actually deprioritized that. They say, yeah, we have to deal with this. Let's deal with it in a year. Others were being given a very urgent timeline, because our political leadership cannot afford to open up the Pandora's box of campaign financing. Campaign financing is who is putting money into our politics. And if you know who is putting money and how much and from where, if you know those people and then you look at the political contractors that come after, you will see a linkage. This political economy of corruption. And I think in any other setting, Honorable Mheshimiwa here will say, yes, we have a big problem. This is one of the big hot potatoes that won't be addressed. I think NADCO is a political settlement. Some things will be taken forward, some things must be addressed, but the things that matter to Kenyans
may not
be. A luta continua, the struggle continues.
There's a deficit in confidence in the House of Parliament to actually address these issues.
Do you know, sometimes I wonder the relationship that we have between the electorate and legislators, right? You know, there is a perception that's created on social media that, they're hated. You know, the people that serve us or we've elected to represent us, we have this love-hate relationship, okay? And that's going to be a given, all right? And during the ballot is when you have a chance to say you're in, you're out, okay? I'm serving my second term. When I went through elections, a lot of people said, oh, you're not going to be re-elected. Why? Because you supported pro-choice, okay? Right? You stood up for the rights of LGBTQI, all right? They're human rights, okay? And for me, I feel that, you know, sometimes as legislators, you're with the wrong party, or you're a Kikuyu, you're supporting BAMBA, it's not going to work. So I want to say something. As a democracy, we're maturing, and education is key, all right? But are we ever going to eliminate tribal politics in Kenya? Are we on that path to eliminate tribal politics? You know, that's the biggest question. Are we on that path where we're going to really work decisively on corruption? That's the big question. Are we, if you look at legislation on IBC and political funding, right? We have the legislation. But have we seen any reports that say this is wrong? Sometimes I wonder, where is all this money coming from? All right, because when you ask the electorate, in America, a presidential candidate opens a fund account and the citizens are the ones who are funding you. Here in Kenya, the citizens expect you to have handouts for them during campaigns. So we've got a cultural problem with how we conduct our politics. Having said that, it will mature. There'll come a time where we talk issues, where we talk leadership, where we talk solutions to problems. And I think we're maturing, and it's a slow process. Now, when it comes to the funds, I feel really sad when you call the funds like NGCDF, GAF as corrupt funds. Okay, let me tell you, when I look at the schools that are being built by some of the members of parliament in their various constituencies through the CDF, I ask myself, look, I was in Dindi Nyoro's constituency the other day, and I saw what he's doing in the education sector. And I saw some of the schools, what it was before, and what he's done with it now. You know, I went for benchmarking. I mean, I don't build schools, but I went for benchmarking. I wanted to see for my Nairobi schools. I've seen the schools that Babu Owino has put in Nairobi. I've seen the schools that were done by the late Ken Okoth in Kibra. I ask myself, surely if we had left, if these MPs had no fund, there would be no schools. Because the county basically is taking care of ECD. The Ministry of Education will have this big country to deal with, right? And there will be probably some places that will be neglected. Okay. So devolution...
Questions have been asked about the role of parliamentarians CDF, and whether or not the discussion should be to broaden the role of parliamentarians, if at all Kenyans feel that members of parliament or members of the National Assembly should be carrying out some of this development.
What about police?
Should in that the conversation we should be having?
We're a different setup.
That's the question.
We're not UK. We're not US.
That's the question that politicians are asking. The courts have spoken.
Yeah, but the courts are disconnected.
Allow me to... We have a system of rule of law and a system of separation of powers. Separation of powers comes for a reason, so that politicians are not the arbiter and the they implemented the arbiter, the jury. And on CDF, the problem is that they do all of that. CDF had its role, and I agree there's amazing work done by many a good number of legislators. I won't even go as far as saying all. And it's hard to know because they don't report. They don't do, there's not been the evaluation, there's not been, the cost benefit, all of that kind of deeper reporting. Over time, CDF has become more opaque. They generalize. When we started out our work in monitoring the CDF, we were able to go onto the website and get a list of projects, give it to the citizens and tell them, go and find whether these projects are, being run properly. After enough litigation cases and enough pressure, what did the board do together with the parliamentarians? They made it opaque. So now all you have is major budget lines and allocations. And when you go to the CDF office and ask for the list, some will give, but majority will not. So on one hand, there is a reduction in accountability. There's a lack of reporting. Even the reporting used to be more detailed. And then as Parliament went making the legislation, they minimized reporting to the statutory reporting, which is the audit reporting, which doesn't give visibility. No. Why are they able to do that? Because they are the ones who make the law. They are the ones who then appropriate the money. They then are the ones in charge of the implementation and the oversight. So the problem with CDF, and I believe CDF should continue, but it should become a citizens' fund.
It is.
No, it should be a citizens' fund, and you should listen to the proposals that we made in terms of
totally delinked from the member.
Delinking from the, and also avoiding the competition with the county function, because what this government is trying to do and parliamentarians are trying to convince the president is to create the constituency as a unit of development. It is not. The court, by the way, has spoken at the Supreme Court level, and NGCDF, even the court in the High Court, cannot undo that because we have two levels of development, which is the national and the county level. And it's important to respect that so that we stop wastage of resources through duplication of efforts. Last point is that the county level policing authorities have not been operationalized. The county education structure, I think it's a committee or a board, does exist. But their autonomy and ability to execute their mandate is still wanting. So Parliament is failing us on decentralization because members of Parliament believe development can't happen unless they are there. Because citizens need to see parliamentarians dishing projects. So there is a culture problem, and then there is a legal problem.
Go, then we'll give...
very insightful from my sister here. And I think the divergence and the convergence view of these particular funds is, number one, we need to know once an MP is elected, once a woman rep is elected, there is what is on the ground and there is what we perceive. Like I would be more comfortable to see my sister here registrating very many bills and all that and moving those agendas. But on the ground, when you go down there, they want to see how many schools have you supported, how many bursaries have you given, how many sanitary surveys have you given to Wananchi, how many homes have you given to a packet of unga. So this issue of our MPs, our women reps, our senators having a fund, for me, from where I sit, I think it is a good thing. And if it is implemented well, it is going to do an amazing job. And we have...
If it defies the Constitution, therefore be having...
We can be able to add, maybe we can amend, we can be able to do something. But you remember, there was a presidential memo in regard to this. And from where I sit as a woman, if it goes through and it goes with the 2/3, I think it will be okay for me because the 2/3 gender rule will not come as a standalone bill. So for me, from where I sit, I also want to be a bit selfish because I represent a big constituency, which is the women. We are 51%. So I think our MPs and our women reps and all that, the fund is good. But I also want to remind them, please don't focus on the fund and then forget your legislative and representation and oversight, role in Parliament. And that is why we are having all these problems.
Isn't there a clash, an obvious clash when you have to oversight and you're the one implementing?
Yes, you see, now, I just told you, on the ground, sometimes, you have never campaigned, I'm sure you have not, but maybe, I see like you're going to join politics very soon. But I want to tell you, if you go to the ground, the people listen to the ground, it's as if like you can put your ear on the ground and literally listen. But what it is, they are saying, they are actually looking at you Yes, the woman left for Nairobi because she's here. I can talk and, you know, on her behalf. Yeah. How many schools have you given sanitary towels? How many schools have you given, how many homes have you given a packet of unga? But you see, in your mandate as a registrator, that is not counted.
Yes,
so I think now,
I
think what we need to do is to support the national government so that it can be able to do its mandate. And we also strengthen the private sector so that the private sector and the NGOs and the foundations can be able to do a role. But what are we saying right now?
I'll give you an opportunity to respond to that before we make our final remarks.
For me, you know, we have to look at Kenya in the way Kenya is and the way it works. Our electorate wants to see, what have you done for me lately? Yes. What are you doing for my community? Yes. Now, these funds, right, we're not the ones, it is the executive that manages those funds. It is not us. We oversight those funds. I'll tell you why. Look, I'm a patron for GAF. I go when there's bursaries being given. We've got committees. People are identified who want to receive that. I don't get involved. I go there, I make sure that it's the Nairobians who are getting the bursaries. I make sure that we did public participation. What was the big issue? We don't have good support for SGBV. What did we do? Police units in 17 police stations. We did, we're building a safe house. So making sure that we have a safe house to the highest possible standard, the first one. So for me, having that fund enables me to address, as a representative of the people, issues that are there. But the fund is managed by an AIU holder employed by government, right, who is looking after that fund, oversighted by the Special Funds Committee in Parliament, which I'm not even a member of. So I want to say that, for me, when I look at the police stations that have been built by CDF, when I look at the schools that have been built by CDF, when I look at the children that have gone to school because CDF has understood, the MP has understood which children have not gone to school. So, you know, right now we've got the MCAs also wanting a fund so that they can devolve that unit all the way to the ward level.
You support that?
So yes, yes, because you see, let me tell you what. I recently attended a function with the governor, and the governor was giving out 1 billion shillings worth of bursaries and scholarships to students, needy students in Nairobi. So for me, everybody is trying to do something. There's a way that eventually we'll integrate and we move in the right direction.
And because of time,
Ward fund is important.
I'll give you each about 2 minutes.
Okay. Ward fund is important because we need to develop the wards individually.
I know you'd want to respond to that, but because we are out of time, and I'd want you to mention something to do with this role that Raila Odinga is gunning for at the AU and how it will affect us. So even as you comment on that, spare some 30 seconds at the end to make a comment on that as well.
Right. Number one, I agree. CDF and UCDF have made a great contribution. I also agree that the citizens don't understand the legislative role. If you don't come with projects, you won't be voted back. The best legislators actually usually lose their seats.
Yes.
But as you said, we are a maturing democracy. And we have a problem of citizens who expect handouts. Because the other reality is this citizen who expects projects also expects handouts. And this is actually undermining our electoral system. So people can vote for a thief, a rapist, a murderer, as long as the price is right.
Right.
So we must recognize our electoral culture is broken and we need to fix it. And so as part of that, we need to fix CDF. CDF, and there's a special committee that was set up by the Assembly, I believe in 2021 or 2022, because about 50% or more of CDF projects were incomplete or stalled or non-operational, because CDF is delinked from the planning system because there is no executive implementation role. So right now, that's why I say CDF ward development are slash funds, because they are not fulfilling the development mandate. They build good structures, but then where is the recurrent support? That comes from the development function. So Parliament needs to help us fix the accountability of the implementation function so that legislators can perform as legislators. And our role is let us mature our democracy by fixing the bad habits so that CDF Ward Development Fund can be managed by citizens under the county with the oversight of the legislators.
Will the legislators allow that to happen?
That is the point, because too many of them actually use it for political campaigning and benefiting themselves. In terms of the AU, no, corruption is never justified because we are saying we don't have the money to be stolen. With regard to the AU discussion, of course, we haven't had an outright declaration. The question I think it would be very interesting because of Raila's progressive kind of democratic outlook. There are many issues on the continent that require some, to be kind of spurred. And I was thinking about the cases of Mali, Niger, Guinea, Burkina Faso, which is really a very interesting conversation about pushing out the colonialists. Mm-hmm. And then you find the AU locking out these countries from participating in the AU. So I imagine somebody with Raila and his orientation, if he gets into that space, it will be shaken up. There are big issues of climate change, the digital accountability governance after the BRICS conversations, that you need the kind of legislator who comes and fixes it up. But then on home ground, if he does take up that role, substantively, we are saying we'll lose our key opposition leader. Right now, actually, we can say Raila of today is not the Raila of previous years, and maybe it will be good that he ascends to that position, but he has a role in terms of the succession planning, because we still need the strong political opposition, and hopefully an opposition that will ascend to power if we can fix our electoral system, which is making Kenya a pretend democracy, because our democracy elections are being rigged. So we are never sure who ascended really ascended.
Thank you so much, Wanjiru. Julia?
Thank you so much. I think I'll start with the role of Raila Odinga at the EU. But I want to talk like a lay person, because I think they would not be able to understand the complexity of like what my colleague here, Wanjiru, has already said. I would say like this: if they want to finish opposition, so be it. If you want to get a job, so be it, and that's it. I don't want to comment beyond that until I get the intrigues of what is in it for Kenyans, and even for us, in Kenya. But as I wind up, I want to remind Kenyans, the government will not come with a packet of unga to your doorstep and give it to you. You ought to go back to work, start working, and that's why I keep reminding Kenyans, if you don't work, then you keep saying, serikali saidia. How many can they help, actually, And then the last thing that I want to remind our people, let us invest in cottage industries. Small things, value addition, like what we do in Murang'a, a lot of value addition in dried arrowroots. We do a lot of arrowroot clips, arrowroot flour, and all that. And lastly, let us focus on carbon credit and carbon credit sequestration, because that is the big market. It has not been unpacked. And I think in Murang'a County, we are steering that. And of course, we already have a safe house in Murang'a County. And we are trying to address matters GBV. And I think Kenyans, let us go back to work. All these things that we have discussed here, they're on another level.
Julia, finally, Esther Passaris, you're a big supporter of Raila Odinga.
Yes.
How will that affect your politics?
I mean, for me, Raila is the best man for the job, the Africa Union job, because, he's been there, and I think Africa is lacking leaders of his stature. From Mandela, we have Raila. So I wish him absolutely well. If he does go for this opportunity. When I look at opposition politics, for me, I feel sometimes we have to reach a point where when we see something wrong, we speak out to it, and I will be speaking out to anything that is wrong in anything that the government does. But right now, I feel that it's important for us to figure out how we're going to get forward. I want to give you an example, one or two things. Once I was driving around Nairobi and I saw a hospital in Korogocho and a big structure, and I was wondering, what is this? And I drove in. It was a hospital that had stalled. You talked about stalled projects. It was a hospital that had stalled for over 25 years. It was started even before Mama Lucy. So I went to the Ministry of Education and I said, I stumbled upon this 300-bed hospital, and apparently it's stalled for the last 20 years. And the PS of Health was not even aware of it. And she says, look, I'll come with you. Let's go and have a look. And we went. And then we made sure that, I was in the health committee, we made sure that money was put into it. And we fought to get money put into it. Okay. Today, it's the Margaret Kenyatta Hospital, all right? So I think there is a solution to every problem. As the health committee, we also went to KUTRRH, all right? And we saw an 8 billion shilling project stalled And then we thought, as the health committee, what are we going to do? We made so much noise about it. In the end, they put so much money. Go and see that facility. So every problem has a solution. Okay. But you know what? The solution comes with working together. Recently, I found out that NHIF owes Nairobi hospitals 480 million, and they owe Kenyatta National Hospital 1.6 billion. What do? I call the NHIF boss and I say, excuse me, what's your problem? Why haven't you paid this money? You know, he says, I'm owed 32 billion by government. Straight away, I made a press address to the president online, and I said, hey, you owe 32 billion, you want universal healthcare, you can't get it. I get a message from the PS. I've remitted 2 billion shillings a week ago. I said, 2 billion, when we owe 32 billion, you've got to do better. But I know that without collection of taxes, without efficient spending and allocation, we're going to have a problem. Okay. I think government has to really spend what it's budgeted. We have supplementary in case you need more money, and we have to lead by example. I wasn't happy to hear that State House has spent 400 or 500 million more. I'm not happy to hear that this money here has been lost, 883. I was looking for 1 million shillings from well-wishers and donors and my own personal funds to release detained patients in Bagathi yesterday. Okay. If we have so much money, nobody should be detained in hospitals. So as a country, we have to love our country, no matter how bad it is, and we have to work towards improving it. We can criticize, but let's do something to make the solutions.
Esther Pasaris, Woman Representative, Nairobi County, Wanjiru Gekonyo, Advocate for Good Governance and Accountability, and Julia Chege, Governance Expert, our panelists this morning, as we look at the state of the nation and the headlines that matter to us. Thank you so much. It has been a very vibrant debate, and I think we need to have more of this on this panel. Thank you so much for having time for TV47. Let me go straight to our editorial comment this morning. Today, our attention is drawn to recent revelations of the dire financial situation plaguing our top universities, as outlined in the National Government Budget Implementation Review Report. With pending bills skyrocketing to a staggering 62 billion shillings and no signs of abating, it's evident that urgent intervention is needed to salvage these vital institutions from impending collapse. At the forefront of this financial crisis are esteemed universities such as Kenyatta University, Technical University of Kenya, Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology, Egerton University, and Moi University, all grappling with staggering amounts of debt ranging in the billions. This accumulated burden has rendered these institutions unable to meet essential obligations such as tax payments, employee salaries, and remittances to pension schemes. Now, despite efforts to adapt to the challenges posed by the recent COVID-19 pandemic, the financial strain has been overwhelming, leading to the closure of campuses and the inability to fulfill crucial financial commitments. If left unaddressed, the repercussions could be severe, impacting the quality of education, research, output, and ultimately the future prospects of our nation. It is imperative that immediate action is taken to address this crisis. A comprehensive audit must be conducted to identify the root causes of the financial woes. Additionally, sustainable solutions must be devised